Hello everyone, how y'all doing? So today I kind of wanted to share my brief thoughts on the Yakuza 20th anniversary sort of starter bundle. I don't remember how exactly they call it. I think they say the essential starter, something like that. But basically it's like the trilogy of like Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2 that they released. Not the first time they'd done this. I don't know if previously they released it physically, but at least in this instance they did release like a physical edition, which I kind of wanted to talk about. But in general, it's just the main crutch of this in specific is if you're someone that owns a console, you're essentially having like updated builds that are meant for the Xbox Series S and X. Well, more so X. Well, if we're specifically talking about the physical edition, it's obviously more so X, but obviously you can also buy it on the Microsoft Store. So it would affect both of them as well as the PlayStation 5. I did specifically want to talk about that because that's the one that I bought. I will also briefly talk about the PC side because that also those games also ended up having their builds updated. Well, actually, they really more so just ended up having newer builds, newer entries in the actual store. But I also just want to make it clear that I'm not going to talk too much about Kiwami 3 because it's not too relevant to this video, and it's possible I may end up making sort of like a dedicated video specific to that. But in essence, if you want to know my overall thoughts, is I stand by the whole hashtag remove Kagwa thing. Unless they actually replace the actor, then I see no reason to buy the game, especially when this is just a remake of a game that I already own. And when I say own, I mean I own 4 copies. Like, that's how much I care about this series. I literally have 4 copies of Yakuza 3. I don't need Kiwami. I don't need to play Kiwami 3. It's just telling the same story that, honestly, based on some of the trailer clips that I've seen, I don't even know if some of the cutscenes would even look as good as the original. But again, I might end up just making a dedicated video on that. Today, what I mainly want to talk about is the fact that they essentially remastered Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2. And the thing is, that also came with its own fair share of controversies, which I do also want to address because, to me, let's just say that my overall impressions may not necessarily be the same as everyone else's, even though I do definitely understand. Now, I'm going to start out with Yakuza 0 Director's Cut. Now, the thing is, the Director's Cut is probably the only one that I haven't actually paid to upgrade. Obviously, this is excluding the physical version, which I did end up buying, the Essential Starter. But that's because it's more of a collection thing, and it also has like the steel cover, so, you know, a steel case. And so I did want to buy that just because I thought it was a cool thing to have it collected. But as far as, like, for example, on Steam and even on the PlayStation Store, I didn't buy it. And that's because the Yakuza 0 Director's Cut is the game that I'm the least interested in buying. Because in general, like, first of all, this is essentially just remastering the original game. Like, it's not necessarily offering new content aside from some additional cutscenes that I don't even know if they were like, I don't know, like cutscenes that were originally meant to be included in the original release, but they decided to cut out, because that's kind of what Director's Cut means. It's a Director's Cut. It's meant to represent the actual game that the original director wanted to put in the game, but then usually doing the releases, things end up getting cut. I don't know if any of this was actually meant to be featured in the original release, but regardless, I've seen some of the cutscenes and I didn't like it. I thought it made the game worse, legitimately. The fact that they retcon certain deaths, to me, just like, there's like maybe 2 cutscenes that I like, which is the last interaction between Kiryu and Kuzi, as well as like the final cutscenes in which Kiryu and Nishikiyama are kind of having like a casual discussion where they're reflecting on, like, that cutscene in specific, I know for a fact it's new. Like, some of the dialogue they had there seemed very fan servicey, so I'm pretty sure that's a new cutscene. And to be fair, it was kind of funny. Like, I actually did enjoy for what it was. But like, I don't know if I necessarily, like, at the end of the day, if me playing Yakuza 0 Director's Cut means that I have to experience some of the fucking death retcons that I saw, I'd rather just play the original. Like, I want to preserve my, and that's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm legitimately replaying the whole, I'd say mostly just the Kiryu saga. I don't know if I'm gonna replay the other ones that came afterwards, because I don't know if who knows, maybe I will, but I'm sort of just playing through the Kiryu Saga just because I thought, you know, it's the 20th anniversary, might as well replay all the games again. And obviously I'm also going to play Judgment and Lost Judgment because I care about those games as well. And I also heard that, at least as of right now, Ryuga Gotoku aren't really interested in making new Judgment games, which is pretty sad. Maybe not too surprising, because I feel like Judgment was more of a Nagoshi thing. Like, he was really involved in those games, and now that he left, I guess that also means that Judgment is just kind of put in limbo. Like, I don't know if the people that are in charge of Ryuga Gotoku really care that much about the series as it is, but regardless, as I was saying, Director's Cut is definitely the least interesting. Like, I know there's also new language options, but like, dude, I'm always gonna play in Japanese, so that doesn't matter to me. I'm sure it might be nice for people that play English dubs. Me personally, I don't want to get into the whole Young Ye voice acting controversy. To be honest with you, I don't really care. Like, it affects people that for some reason want to listen to it dubbed, and I don't know why you would want to do that. Like, I feel like the Japanese dub is the default, like the de facto experience that you should be getting with Yakuza, so I don't even know why you would choose that to begin with. And so to me, there's no reason to complain, because I genuinely don't care. Like, unless they just outright remove the Japanese dub, which obviously they're not going to do that, but unless they do that, I don't really care who they cast. And I also don't care if the new release includes English dubs, because I'm not gonna buy the game just because of a dub that I'm not gonna use it. And so now on PC, I think there might be new graphic settings, but I don't know. Yakuza 0 is not the hardest game to run, so I don't know if I care. It might matter a little bit more with Kiwami 2, which I'll get into in a minute, but aside from that, I think there's also like new online modes, but like, I'm not playing Yakuza 0 online, so I don't really care. Like, maybe if I find friends that might want to, I don't know, join something like, I don't even know how the online mode works, but like, I don't really see myself using that, is what I'm trying to say. And so yeah, the Director's Cut is definitely the least interesting. However, Kiwami and Kiwami 2 are different. Now the thing is, with Yakuza Kiwami 1, the main advantage is just that, for starters, I think there are new language options, and not specifically dub, I'm more so talking about just the overall language, the default language set for the game. I think there's more options, which I think is good. Again, not necessarily something that affects me, because I'm going to play it in English, but for other people, I can see that being an advantage. But I think it's also mainly the fact that Yakuza Kiwami, when that thing came out, they ended up removing some licensed music, and with this newer release, they actually did include some of the licensed music that they had removed before, which is a good thing. Now, obviously, if you're on PC, that doesn't necessarily matter too much, because you can probably just mod a lot of that stuff, but for someone like me that likes collecting physical media, I think it's nice to have a disc that actually has the original music, which I think is nice. And I will say though that for some reason, like on Steam, I did end up paying the $2 because it's like, whatever, I'll pay $2. On PS5, on the other hand, I actually can't do it. Like, whenever I go to the store page for Yakuza Kiwami, it says unavailable, and this has been happening pretty much ever since they released it. I remember because I was literally like watching as it was releasing. It was on the 5th of December. Now, I think RGG Studio has acknowledged this is an issue, and apparently they're fixing on it, but they don't really have a time frame for when this will be fixed. And so until then, I guess I can't really upgrade my PlayStation Store version of the game. Not that I necessarily need it, because again, I did end up, I do have it on PC, and so, you know, it's not like I can't play it. But I would imagine for someone that only had a PS5 and maybe wasn't necessarily too interested in buying the Essential Starter Pack that they released, and they mainly wanted to play their digital copy, then this would be extremely annoying to have to deal with. And so I do hope that RGG Studio is able to fix this, because it is definitely annoying. And then there's Kiwami 2, and Kiwami 2 is a free upgrade, and so, you know, I think in general it's just the same game, but on PC, I have to assume that they now have higher resolution textures, which is something that you do end up kind of have to deal with whenever you play, not just Yakuza, but just a lot of older games in general, is that they're not really gonna have the highest resolution textures, and so that might be one advantage to playing. I mean, I haven't tested this myself, but I have to assume that that is something that you do take advantage of, as well as the fact that, again, there are more graphic options, which I think is good, because in my experience with like the earlier builds of the Dragon engine is that they tend to be pretty GPU intensive, and I think later on, like I remember like Judgment in specific, Judgment seemed easier to run with, like, when I don't know, like in general, when I was testing certain resolutions, it just always felt like it was overall easier to run compared to Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2. And I am interested in testing Kiwami 2 as it is, because if they're using like the later versions of the Dragon engine, they might be a little bit easier to run, and they also have some upscaler options, which I think is good. Definitely nice just having those options. Like, obviously, you know, there's downsides to using upscalers, but I think it's important to at least have that option if you're someone who's trying to just experiment with different graphic options. It's just overall a good thing to have that. Now, one thing I do want to complain a little bit about is the fact that these newer builds, they can't really transfer old save files, which I think is a bit of a shame, because, for example, me personally, as I'm playing through the original Yakuza 0, because again, I'm not really interested in the director's cut, but I do see myself eventually playing Kiwami and Kiwami 2, and I am interested in playing the newer builds. But I will say, though, that the fact that I can't carry my older save files, and, you know, I don't know, like, I mean, I guess I will play in Legend difficulty, which does technically mean I have to start from 0 regardless. But even then, I'm pretty sure for Legend difficulty, you will need to have like a completed save file. So I would have to go through that. To be honest, I'll probably just have to go online, and because there's a mod that actually allows you to convert the save file from the previous version of the game to the newer one, which is interesting because, you know, I remember seeing that mod, and it became available like almost day one, and so it's kind of weird that like the modding scene is able to come up with a solution, but not the actual studio. But whatever. I guess we'll have to deal with that bullshit. And yeah, overall, I'll probably just end up using that, and I think it'll be fine. I guess another complaint is the file size, because I did end up comparing the older with the newer one. For example, the original Kiwami, which is now called Kiwami Legacy on Steam, it says here that it only requires 20 gigabytes, but if I look at the newer one, it's 30. Now, 10 gigabytes difference, you know, kind of sucks, but, you know, whatever. Now, if you look at Kiwami, Kiwami 2, on the other hand, the original one is like only requires like 41 gigabytes. The newer one, like 60. It's like, okay, that's a little... And I think Yakuza 0 Director's Cut is even worse. I don't remember because I don't have the game on my library, but like I think I heard it was like a really big file size, because the original one is only like what, 20 something. It's not that big, but apparently Yakuza 0 is like above 60 or something like that, which that's fucking insane, dude. Like, I don't know how you balloon the file size all that much, but, you know, I guess that's just modern day video game development. Regardless, that's another advantage to having to play the newer ones, is that you do have to open up a bit more of your storage. I think I can probably deal with that, but again, it is kind of annoying that you have to deal with that shit, but I guess it is what it is. Now, the other thing I also did want to shed light to is the fact that, and this is something that I saw people complain about this ever since it was announced, and this is where well, actually, no, there's two sides to this discussion, and I'll save Yakuza 0 for later, but for starters, I do want to talk specifically about Kiwami. Well, actually, no, the 3 games, because it affects all 3 games, which is the fact that, like I said before, if you have a PS5 and an Xbox Series console, you do have the option to upgrade. Specifically Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2, you have the option to upgrade them to the PS5 builds, but that's only if you have the digital version of the game, like the ones that are purchased on the respective stores. If you have the physical version, as an example, you don't really have that upgrade path, unfortunately. Like, it's just something that's not really made available to you, which I definitely did see a lot of people that were very upset about that. And the thing is, to me personally, my overall stance on that is a little bit complicated, because the thing is, so let's talk specifically about PS5, because that's the console that I have. So PS5, there are some games, the PS4 games in specific, that have PS4 upgrades available. Like, if you actually look at the cover, like the case for the game, it'll say there PS5 upgrade available. So that essentially means that the game in question, the disc that you're buying does include the PS4 build that you can install from the disc, even if you're not connected to the internet. Just want to make that clear. However, if you are connected to the internet, it does grant you a license to essentially download the PS5 build from the PlayStation Store. Now, you're not necessarily going to have a license key for the digital listing on the store. It's more so a case of you have the permission to play the PS5 build downloaded from their servers, but at the end of the day, you do still need the actual disc to verify that you do indeed own the game. So for these games in specific, that would kind of be what you would be expecting, because I wouldn't necessarily expect them to, well, actually, maybe out of goodwill, maybe they could have done that. But regardless, like for example, with Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, at the end of the day, you know, for as much as I don't think Director's Cut is offering that much new content, at the end of the day, RGG Studios, they are treating this as a different game. Like, when you go to the PlayStation Store, it's not like when you look at Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, you're not seeing, like, for example, oh, if you change the edition, you'll get the base version, which is for the PS4. It's like, no, this is a completely different listing. And so this is not the same as like buying a DLC or anything like that. Or at least that's how RGG Studios are treating it. And so because of that, I would say that I think I somewhat understand the logic of not allowing you to do that, because again, like, and the same thing is true for like even Kiwami and Kiwami 2, because the older ones that are right now, we're just essentially just calling them legacies, they do have different listings from the newer PS4 and PS5 editions. Like, they're actually different listings, and so that's why the upgrade pad doesn't really exist. Because, for example, if I have a copy of Yakuza, actually I don't have a copy of Yakuza Kiwami, but I think I have a copy of Kiwami 2. If I have a disc copy of Kiwami 2, like, how would that even work? Well, actually, in that case, they could just give me the same thing as, like, because I think Yakuza Like a Dragon, and I think also DBZ Kakarot, when those two games were originally released, they didn't have the PS5 upgrade available tag. But when they did release the PS5 builds, they did allow people to just download that. So I guess they could have done that at least for Kiwami 2. But as for Kiwami 1 and Kiwami, Kiwami 1 and Director's Cut, they decided not to do that. And I will say, though, that I think they should have at least given us the option to do that. But again, I guess that more or less just has to do with how they decided to list those games on the actual store, and how the PlayStation Store is kind of categorizing those three games. Like, they seem to be treated as if they're separate listings, and that's why this sort of like license conversion would be maybe a little bit complicated for people that own the disc version, which is annoying. It's definitely still annoying. Like, for example, me personally, like, I was lucky because even though I do own Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 2 physically, I did also already own the digital copies. Like, I bought them. I think I bought them even before I collected the physical discs, and so I already had them on my account, and so it's not really a problem to upgrade them. I have the upgrade path available, but for people that only own the disc copies, that certainly would have been extremely annoying to have to deal with. And so I definitely do understand their frustration, though I do also want to say that, like, if you're someone that like really cares about collecting physical media, in my personal opinion, like, the best option is always going to be to buy the essential starter pack, the PS5 remastered trilogy for Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2, because with those discs, you actually are owning the newer PS5 builds. And in my experience, because I've tested those 3 games, they seem to be generally pretty decent releases as far as like, you know, you're actually buying discs that don't require updates. Like I think Yakuza 0 in specific, like there was like an update on queue for like 1.03 or something like that, but like I did test the 1.0 build. It works well. It seemed to be working well. No internet, no download, no patch required. It seemed to be working pretty well. And so, in my opinion, that's the thing that you should be mainly targeting. Now, obviously, it costs money. You are paying. I think I paid like $60, and so compared to just paying $2 and $15, it's definitely a worse deal in terms of how much money you're spending. But in terms of just overall owning and collecting games, I think that's, in my opinion, the better option. But at the end of the day, that's up for you to decide. I can't really make that decision for you. It does kind of depend on what your values are as far as like physical media in general, because I have my own values, and that's why for me personally, like whether or not I have the upgrade paths that are offered to the digital copies relative to the physical copies doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, because I feel like I would have always bought the PS5 bundle regardless, because to me that's what makes the most sense as someone that does care about collecting physical media and owning games. But for other people it might be different, and I do respect that. Now the other thing that people also complain about is Yakuza 0 getting delisted. Now this is where I guess I'm gonna share my my hot take my little hot take about this, because while I do still hold on to the belief that the original Yakuza 0 is a better version than this newer one, I personally don't see a major problem with them delisting the original one. Now let me explain. So one thing that people always like to, one angle that people always like to come from whenever we're discussing this is game preservation. Like Sega delisting the original Yakuza 0 is a preservation problem, because they're preserving a version of the game that should continue to exist. People should be able to buy it and everything like that. Now, if you've watched my previous video, then you know that I am someone that cares a lot about game preservation. I truly do believe that, you know, just media in general, there's issues with the way people are preserving it, and I'm someone that advocates for older media to continue to exist afterwards. But one thing I will say though, and this is where I'm going to say something that might seem contradictory, but I don't necessarily think that a video game publisher should have the responsibility of maintaining their old games forever. So there's two ways you could view this. So for example, on a PS5, or PS4, I guess, because the original, well, it would technically be PS3, but let's talk about PS4, because I think that's the one that people mainly bought. I don't think people bought fucking Yakuza 0 for the PS3. I don't think it was even released for the West back then. Let's talk about PS4. Like, do I expect Sega to continue publishing the original Yakuza 0 forever? Well, that would be nice. Let's actually think about what that actually means. That means that they are essentially continuously printing discs, shipping out to overseas, and constantly just releasing this game forever. They're constantly making this thing available till the end of times. The same is true for digital edition. Like, even if you are releasing something digitally, there are still maintenance costs, there are still licensing fees, because they always have to renew license for all the copyright and licensed content that's on there. So I'm sure they have to constantly renew certain contracts with people. That's money that they're spending. Now, do I think it makes sense for them to do this forever? No. I don't think it makes sense, because at the end of the day, like, there's going to come a point in time when a game, no matter how iconic it is, it's not going to be profitable to just continue making this available forever. Now, I'm not saying that this necessarily applies to Yakuza 0, but I would still say that there's plenty of games that, like, at some, like, even Yakuza 0 to some degree, it already kind of reached its peak of popularity. Like, it already reached the peak of sales. Like, following this, I don't think, like, Yakuza 0 is going to suddenly get, like, an explosion of sales or anything like that. And so, you know, I don't like, let's just say that I don't blame Sega if they want to delist and stop releasing a version of the game that they believe not enough people are buying for them to justify continuing maintaining this. Meanwhile, the director's cut, they have reason to believe people still would have interest in buying this. Now again, I personally think the original is better. I think that one is the one that makes the most sense. And in fact, with the director's cut, one thing that kind of puts a sour taste in my mouth is the fact that it's more expensive. Like, it's $50 if I'm not mistaken. Meanwhile, the original one was like 20, and so you're paying almost, no, I think you're paying more than double. So that is not like that does not leave us, that doesn't exactly leave me very happy just knowing about that. But even still, like, you know, like, when, for example, a lot of the times when I'm seeing people complain about the fact that Yakuza 0 got delisted, a lot of them are people that already bought the game. And now, and this is the thing, like, if you're someone that buys games digitally, I do think that this is concerning in the sense that, for example, with Steam, right now you can still download Yakuza 0 if you have a license to it, but who knows how long it'll take before whatever proxy servers, maybe not, maybe actually no, I'm not even gonna talk about proxy servers, just their servers in general. Like, who knows how long the servers that are up that allow you to download the game, like wherever this is being data hoarded, like, who knows how long it's gonna last, you know what I mean? Like, for something that's no longer being sold, who knows like when it'll suddenly get busted, like who knows when it'll suddenly just stop working. Because I remember hearing about one of the versions of it was like a Batman Arkham game that apparently right now the original build, like one of the original ones, are kind of broken on Steam, at least for some people. So like, that's one of the things that might concern me. It's like, at some point, when is that eventually gonna happen? I don't think that's gonna happen now, but it is still something that I would certainly be. I would certainly understand if people were concerned, and so, you know, maybe I would say that for the time being, if you have Yakuza 0, maybe download it and archive it somewhere. Obviously, you would still need the Steam API to make it work, but like, that's better than nothing, I guess. Regardless, still, that's something to be concerned. But like, at the end of the day, you know, you are essentially complaining that that people are not gonna be able to buy a game. Meanwhile, you have the game. A lot of people probably have the game, and while it sucks for people that didn't get the chance to buy the game because they now have to buy the director's cut, which in my opinion is an inferior version, at the same time, like even if I don't necessarily think that now would have been the best time for them to delist it, I do still think that at some point they would need to do it. Because again, like, you can't really expect, like, I understand, like, Sega's $1 billion company. I understand, like, you know, boo-hoo, I'm crying about multi-billion-dollar companies wanting to save money. But like, at the end of the day, that is still money. Like even if you don't want to speak at it, even if you don't want to look at it from the perspective of companies having to continuously pay fees for something that might not be profitable anymore, think of it from an environmental viewpoint. Like, imagine all of the server costs, like, and all of the environmental impacts that comes with, like, all of the, like, fucking carbon emissions and all that for something that who knows how many people are actually going out of the way. Like, I'm not saying this is applicable to the current Yakuza 0, but like, let's say, for example, like 50, maybe 50 might be a little bit too, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now, like, how many people by that point are like buying Yakuza 0, downloading it actively? How many people are doing that? And like, the amount of like data that's being, like, the amount of like the amount of activity going on in this game, how much of it is actually like enough to like justify the cost to maintaining the game forever? You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's like, I do acknowledge the fact that at some point, publishers, I do think they should be allowed to not to not keep a game up for sale forever. However, I do also understand that there are some pretty bad implications when it comes to that. However, with Yakuza 0 in specific, I feel like there's already a solution to that, and that is just simply buying the GOG copy. Like, that is the perfect solution, because you buy it on GOG, it's the original release. Granted, they do have some credits removed, which is really shady, but regardless, like, it's the original build, and it's DRM free, so it doesn't even have like the Steam API or anything like that. You can literally just buy that game, archive it on a hard drive, and even if you fucking, I don't know, if you lose your account, if your account gets banned or hacked or something like that, if you have an archive of that, which I do, then who cares if you still have your GOG account? You own the game. Like, there's already a solution for the game as far as like preservations. Like, Yakuza 0 is preserved forever. Like, that game is not going to die. Like, once a game has like a DRM free version, that shit is not going to die. The community is going to keep that thing up forever. And so, I don't know, to me personally, I don't think this is a problem per se. I think it's more of a case of, you know, people don't really agree with which version of the game is currently the one that's like the highlight, like the de facto, like the definitive version. And I do agree with that. I definitely do. But I don't think that it's a preservation problem. Like, I don't think the original Yakuza 0 has a preservation problem. Like, I mean, me personally, like, I have the GOG copy. I also have the physical copy, the original physical copy that still says only on PlayStation. I also have it on PlayStation Store. I have it downloaded somewhere. So, like, me personally, I don't feel like I lost Yakuza 0 forever. But it is true that for people that wanted to buy Yakuza 0 on Steam or PlayStation or Xbox, they can't really do that. But again, they do have the option to buy it on GOG. And so, I don't know, me personally, I don't really see this as much of a problem. Like, and again, like, maybe you might not necessarily agree with that take, but like, that's fine. But that's just how I view things. And me personally, like, a more ideal scenario would just simply be for them to release Yakuza 0 without all of the added content and all that stuff. And if that was the case, I probably wouldn't even be complaining right now. Like, if this was the same, like if the story content that they were offering was the same as the original one, I probably wouldn't even really be talking about this. Because, for example, I don't think people are complaining about Kiwami 1 and 2 being replaced with these newer ones, because yeah, sure, people can complain about the file size and whatever, but like, realistically, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, people are buying games that are way larger than this, so who cares? But Yakuza 0 is more of a problem because the newer replacement is one that, like, I and a lot of people just do not think is the best version of Yakuza 0. But again, I don't think this is as much of a problem as I think other people are portraying this as. My only real, I guess the only thing that I am kind of wondering is Yakuza 6. Because Yakuza 6 right now is probably the only game as far as like modern day Yakuza games that are not in 60 FPS. And so, yeah, I wonder what's gonna be like. Obviously, when I'm talking about 60 FPS, I'm talking about PS5 and Xbox. Obviously, on PC you can play at 60 FPS, but like, yeah, like I thought about that. Like, that's the one game that you can't play at 60 FPS. So who knows? Maybe one day we'll get blessed with that. But I do wonder when that's gonna happen, though. I truly do. I don't know. Hopefully. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter too much, but like, I do hope that they're able to do that one day, because I think people deserve to play this at 60 FPS, because that was kind of one of the downgrades that you ended up experiencing. Yeah, I think that's just my overall thoughts. I'm not, like, I don't know. I definitely do think that there's bigger controversies with RGG Studios, because the thing is, when you watch this video, it might seem like I'm being super apologetic, which is not necessarily how I feel. I think it's just more of a case of I might be seeing some things from a different perspective from other people that maybe isn't as negative, but that doesn't necessarily mean I think there isn't anything to be negative about. For example, Kiwami 3, I'm not going to buy this game, and that's just how it is. But as far as like the whole essential starter pack, you know, I think it could have been worse, to be fair. And, I don't exactly regret my buy. It's just more of a case of, there's some areas where I think they could have done a lot better. Like, I don't know, sometimes you have to wonder, like, when you have a game like Yakuza 0 that's so beloved, like, you don't really have a lot of room to make mistakes when you're re-releasing the game. But somehow they did. But I guess it is what it is, I guess. I guess that's really all I have to share. And yeah, remove Kaguya. Goodbye.